We're back. We've been talking inheritance. In our last video, we added teacher to our class hierarchy. Here we see teacher kind of beneath person in the class hierarchy. The way that ends up manifesting in code is teacher is extending person. That makes teacher a subclass of person. At this point, person has multiple subclasses, but notice that each of these only have one superclass. That is, student has one superclass, it's person. Teacher has one superclass, it's person, right? But person has multiple subclasses. What I really like about this arrow is it kind of shows the flow of this, right? It's ultimately up to teacher to do the extending. It's up to student to do the extending, right? Teacher is extending person. Student is extending person. If we go and look at person, no reference to either of those classes anywhere in the entirety of person. Okay, so the superclass ultimately has no idea what classes are extending it as a result. Doesn't really care. It's up to these to do the extending and thus inherit the stuff. Okay, this is ultimately what we're looking at is the person class diagram. A class diagram is just one of many types of diagrams that fall under UML documentation. But it shows not only the classes and what they can do, but how they interact, right? Okay, I want to add college student to this class hierarchy. Think for a moment, where do you think it should go? Ultimately, I would say that college student is a student. So I want to actually add college student down here. Let's zoom out just a little bit more. Right. In order to do this, I'm going to come in here and grab my little arrow thing, hover over this bad boy. And there we go. Okay, now we're showing that college student is a student. Let's create this class and throw it into our class hierarchy. So I'm creating a new class called college student. And in order to add it, take a look at what we are extending. I'm not extending person. We are beneath person in the class hierarchy, but I am extending student. Okay, so if I were to ask what is the superclass of college student, you should say student. I would not say that person is a superclass of college student. You can only have one superclass is part of that. The other is the stuff that's in person, student will inherit, right? Things like get first, get last. And then ultimately college student is going to inherit the stuff that's in student, as well as the stuff in person, but through student. I really like this, and we've used the terms like child and parent before, and now we got like a grandchild ultimately. I do like this biology reference, ultimately because think about this. Traits that your grandparent had, you will inherit them, but not directly from the grandparent. You're inheriting them from your parent. Okay, let's flesh this out, and we'll actually see this in action. I'm going to add on a major and minor. So we'll say private, string, major, minor. Because those are both string, I can do them both at the same time. We are ready to alt insert a constructor. It's asking me, what do you want to call from student? The superclass. Okay, we can do a no args one. We can do when we take in stuff. Let's take in a value for everything. It's now asking me what instance variables from college student I want to incorporate. Using either shift click or control click, I'm going to get both of those highlighted and hit OK. And here you see our college student constructor. We have 6 instance variables in total. A college student has a first and last name, an ID, a GPA, a major, and a minor. And all that makes sense. Yes, these are things that a college student would have. But notice that the only thing I actually wrote was major and minor. All of the code related to a first and last name, an ID, and a GPA, we're inheriting it. I didn't have to write it. This is one of the programming benefits of inheritance. Okay, first thing that's going to happen is, of course, our call to the superclass. And then we're going to set our major and minor here ourselves. Let's go ahead and finish this out by alt inserting our getters and setters. Which instance variables? Both of them. So there's our get major, our set major, get minor, set minor. In practice, you can have multiple majors, right? You can have multiple minors. So I would consider making these things data structures like an array or an array list. But Here, just to demonstrate the idea, I'm saying you can only have one of each. And then we're going to finally do our toString. You can alt insert a toString. In fact, I'll show you what it looks like if we were to do that. If I just alt insert it, right, it is based on just college student. If I go the override route, right, I want to override methods, and I want to override the student toString. Ultimately, that's the one that we are inheriting here. All right, we're going to see super.toString. I'm a little curious as to, we have 6 instance variables, right? The superclass is student. What's going to happen here? Why don't we just pause right there, and we'll actually go ahead and make a college student to see what we got so far. So I'm going to either, I would comment this out if I were you, but I'm going to delete it just so it's a little bit more clear on our screen here as we're demonstrating. I'm going to create a college student. Now you can have students and teachers and persons all existing within this same scope, but I just want to make one at a time. I'm going to make a college student. The first name that popped in my head was Donald Glover. So here we go. Oh, one moment. Hi, buddy. That's my mouse. That's my mouse you're playing with. You want to say hi to the people? Meow. All right. So, we're making Donald Glover, of all names popped in my head. We got a first name. We got a last name. Next is going to be some type of ID, about 1, 2, 3, 4. And we need a GPA of 3.7. Lastly, I need a major. We'll say computer science. And then I'm going to need a minor. Notice this line here. This is the IntelliJ suggestion of you really don't want to go past this line. It's for readability purposes. Obviously, we can go past this line, and this line is something that you can kind of set. Whatever your job is will tell you how many columns effectively, right? That's what we're actually looking at. Somewhere on the screen, it's going to tell me what column I'm literally at right now. But, so I'm going to maybe go down with my major. We're still in the constructor, but my major is computer science, and my minor is underwater basket weaving. Is basket weaving one word? Oh, IntelliJ thinks it's 2 words. Okay. That's a lot. But we have 6 instance variables, so yeah, that's kind of expected. Let's do a SOUT on our college student. I'm very curious to see this toString and what all is involved. Okay, we see our first name of Donald, our last name of Glover, our ID, and our GPA. We don't see our major and minor, even though I'm passing it in to the constructor. So the question is there something wrong with the constructor? Let's take a look at the flow of what happens here, because this is super interesting. I'm creating a new college student. Right here, we are calling a college student constructor that takes in a string, an integer, a double, and then string. I've only got one college student constructor. It's this one that takes in all of those things. First thing that happens in here, we're going to call super, providing first, last, ID, and GPA. That's first, last, ID, GPA. The first 4 parameters are going to get passed up to the superclass constructor. So what is the superclass of college student? It's student. Let's go find a constructor that matches this signature. String, int, double. Right here it is, right? String, int, double. What's the first thing that happens there? We're going to call super, passing up string, our first and last. What is the superclass of student? Person. Let's go to person. Here's the person constructor that matches that signature. It's going to take that first and last and save them into the instance variables. Control comes back to student, where we would then set our ID and GPA. And then control comes back to college student, where we set our major and minor. So my major and minor is working. Right? If I were to actually come in here and take my college student, we could easily call get major, get minor. Why don't we actually print that off and see that it is working? Okay, we see our major is computer science, so that is being set. It must be related to our toString. Okay, whenever we call our toString, we are getting stuff with our first and last name, our ID, and GPA. What I'm not seeing is major and minor. Now, if you think about this, those four things are all related to our student toString. So when college student calls toString, it's going to first call super.toString. That's going to go to the student class, the super class of college student. First thing it does, it calls its super.toString. So we're going to go into person.toString, where we get our first and last. Control goes back to student, where we tack on our ID and GPA. Then control goes back to college student, where we're returning that. So right here we have this string. All of this data is just sitting right here. I need to add to it my major and minor. So I'm going to do a new line where we tack on our major. And then we're going to tack on our minor. Okay, I'm going to run my driver again. We're still calling the same method. And there we have it. Those are all 6 values related to my college student. Let's once again take a look at the flow. Right here, when I try to print college student, what I'm really saying is college student dot toString. Right, we're making an implicit call. We're going to call college students toString. First thing it does, it calls super.toString. That's going to jump to student. First thing it does, it calls persons.toString. That's going to make us jump to person. Person produces a first and last and returns it. That's going to send control back to student, where we tack on an ID and a GPA. We return that, which is going to relinquish control back to college student, where we tack on this information and return that. And that is how we get all of this. What is so awesome about this is we got a lot accomplished with very little code, right? We reduce a significant amount of code, duplicate code that would otherwise exist. One question I frequently get asked is, can we call super, right? Can I just circumvent the superclass and go one above, right? If I know I have a grandparent, can I do this? No. Doesn't quite work that way. The logic here is syntactically, you are not guaranteed to have a superclass. Okay. There's a little caveat there, right? So what I am kind of saying is you are guaranteed to have one superclass. There's just not guaranteed to be one above that. Whoa. Wait a second. Person doesn't have a superclass. Or does it? We're actually going to see in a future video that there is something above person here. You're just not seeing it. Okay. So that is adding college student to our class hierarchy. And I really like it because it makes sense, right? This is one thing we get from inheritance, is that we get to represent ideas in real life, in a much more meaningful manner. Class hierarchies exist in real life. Categories exist in real life. And here we go. But we also add in a third level to our class hierarchy. That is probably going to be a good spot to stop it. I'll see you in the next one.